Okay. Sorry about that. Is the Earth flat? No. Thank you very much for coming.
Hey, I think
What?
you need to tell us a little bit more before you walk.
I answered the question.
Yeah. I can't deny that, but a little bit more would be nice. I know it's late for you, but
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. You may wonder why I'm worried about people who think the Earth is flat, and I have several reasons. One of them is the fact that for much of my lifetime, our critics have equated belief in creation with belief that the Earth was flat. And for decades, that was hyperbole. No one really thought that. But then around 2014, about 8 years ago, suddenly this flat Earth movement blew up on the internet. And I found out about it a year or two later, and it got me very much concerned. And I've discovered that many Christians have been sucked into this, unfortunately. And how many of you know a flat earther? Raise your hands. Okay, good number of you. I would dare say the rest of you probably know some flat earthers, but don't know that you know that. They're not telling you about it. But I'm telling you, they're everywhere. It's amazing how many. We get them at the museum, the Creation Museum. We have people writing in. We have people writing letters to us and telling us they're never going to listen to us again because we're not telling the truth anymore. Now, you may wonder, didn't we settle this whole question 500 years ago when Christopher Columbus proved the Earth was a globe? That's what I learned growing up in school years ago. I don't know how it is here in Norway, but in the United States we all learned that. Well, it turns out that wasn't true. Turns out we settled this 2,500 years ago. 25 centuries ago we settled this question. Amen. You may have heard of a guy named Pythagoras. Remember that Pythagorean theorem? 6th century BC, and he wrote that said that the Earth was a globe. Now, we don't know his reasons for that. We can only speculate. But then you had another guy, Parmenides, in the 5th century, who said the Earth was a globe as well. And this chain has continued in the West ever since. Now, I will congratulate flat earthers for bringing up a good epistemological study. And you may say, what? Well, epistemology. Here's a dictionary definition of it. The study or a theory of the nature and grounds of knowledge, especially with reference to its limits and validity. Like most dictionary definitions, kind of long-winded, isn't it? Here's my good short definition. Epistemology is how we know what we know. Okay, and there's a whole field of study called epistemology, and very few people actually have bothered to think this through. I thought, well, why do I believe this? And what reasons do I have for believing things? You see, I have found that very few of us were ever actually educated about the shape of the Earth. We were indoctrinated. All of us were told from our earliest days the Earth is a globe, but how many of you actually were shown evidence to that fact? And virtually none of them were. When I was at the university teaching my first semester of astronomy to students, I would get to this in history of astronomy, and I'd ask, okay, how many of you believe the Earth is a globe? And they'd all raise their hands. I shudder to think if I were still at the university what kind of response I'd get today. But and I'd say, okay, well, give me a reason or two why you think the Earth is a globe, and they couldn't come up with any. Finally, somebody would suggest pictures from space, and I'd say, well, wait a minute, can't you fake pictures? Yeah. And on top of that, we didn't have spacecraft until after I was born. And I'm pretty certain my parents and grandparents thought the Earth was a globe, so there must be better reasons than that. So I think the flat earthers are correct on a point here. Very few of us have been educated about the Earth's shape. We've been indoctrinated about it, told what to believe, but not tell us why. And as an educator of science, I was deeply concerned with my students understanding why we know things to be true. I tried to get that across to people. That's true education. So I'll share one with you. This is a picture of a total lunar eclipse I took, I think, in January of 2017 or 2018. I can't remember which year now. I took this from my house. For those, how many of you do a lot of photography? Okay, this is a 13-second exposure. I used a Questar telescope. It has a 1,300 millimeter focal length. tells you, yeah, somebody knows. That's a pretty whale of a telephoto lens. It's a telescope. It nearly fills the field of view. You can see one star off the side there. I think it's a pretty good, I really am pleased with how this turned out. Now, I took pictures before totality. This is during totality. It's completely immersed in the Earth's shadow. The reason why it's darker and redder towards the bottom is because that's near the center of the Earth's shadow. Up near the top, it's near the edge. That's actually still in shadow, but barely. But before totality, there's about a 45 minutes to an hour of partial phases. And here's a picture of one of those that I took. Now, this is a much shorter exposure. It's like 1,000th of a second because the moon is much brighter then. Now, you can see the encroaching shape, the shadow of the Earth there. And what shape does it look like? It looks curved, like part of a circle. Now, I can help you out there. I can show you a picture I took after totality, when it was escaped, when the Earth's shadow was leaving the moon's surface. Now, can you really get a picture of what the moon looks like, or the shadow looks like? Well, in case you're really challenged, I can help you out even more. And it turns out that the Earth's shadow is a lot larger than the moon is. Now, we know a lunar eclipse is caused by the Earth's shadow falling on the moon because you have the sun over here, you have the moon over there, opposite with the Earth in the middle. And it only happens when the Earth is exactly in the middle. It doesn't happen every full moon. There's a reason for that I don't need to go into right now. But we have very good evidence that it's the Earth interposing between the sun and the moon that causes it. And if the moon's lit up by the sun, which is pretty good evidence for that too, then you've got the shadow falling on it.
But isn't this evidence for Mickey Mouse?
It could be as well. Yes, it could be. So, yeah, Mickey Mouse arguments. That's what I'm giving you here. So I'm going to ask the question: what kind of shape can cast a circular shadow? Does anybody have a large, round, flat object we could use? I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. This will work. Very good. That'll work. I have a round, flat object here. So if the Earth were flat like this, and that's what flat earthers think, the Earth is round and flat like a disc or a dish or a plate. If the Earth is like this, then if the sun's over here and it casts light like this, what kind of shadow will it cast? Circular. It will be circular shadow. And that would correspond to midnight. I'd be standing here and the moon is high overhead. And when I did those photographs of the eclipse, it was around midnight. But a friend of mine happened to be in Hawaii that night. To be in Hawaii in January. And where he was, the moon was just rising. And he was like this. And the light was coming like that. Now, will this cast a circular shadow with the light coming this direction? No. Not at all. This will cast a circular shadow, but only for one particular orientation. Any other orientation, it's going to be an ellipse, which is a flattened circle, or it's going to even be a line. What's the only shape that will always cast a circular shadow regardless of orientation? A ball. Now, I didn't come up with this. Aristotle, heard of him? Around 350 BC, we're talking 24 centuries ago, he wrote a book called On the Heavens. And in that book, he said the Earth was a globe. And he gave 4 reasons, and one of them is this: the fact that the shadow of the Earth during a lunar eclipse is always circular. I've seen more than a dozen total lunar eclipses and a number of other partials, and it's true. Every time it's a circle. And that's pretty powerful evidence, I believe. How do flat earthers respond to that? Well, they just say that the Earth's shadow is not what's causing a lunar eclipse. And I asked them, well, what's causing it then? They say, well, I don't know and I don't care, but I know it's not the Earth's shadow falling on it. That's kind of a weird way that flat earthers tend to look at things. They don't tell you what they believe, they tell you what they don't believe. That's strange. They tell you positively the Earth is flat. Many of them will even say, they don't know what the shape the Earth is. I know it's not a globe. So they tend to define the world in terms of what I think it's a negative way of looking at the world and telling you what you don't believe rather than telling you what you do believe. Can you imagine doing theology that way? Who is God? Well, God is not this, and God is not that. Well, yeah, who is he? Yeah, but he's not this and he's not that. But yeah, who is he? But he's not. That's the way they answer questions. Now, another argument he gave was that the altitudes of stars, as you travel north and south in the northern and southern part of the sky, change. Now, this is 3-dimensional and kind of hard to see. I'll try to illustrate it, but I'm going to show you a picture right here. Anybody recognize where this was taken? The Ark Encounter, yes. Did I mention the Ark Encounter? Y'all need to go, right? And if you step outside of Imzara's Cafe restaurant and step a little away from that, heading back towards the entrance, you'll recognize this position. Now, an amateur astronomer friend and I, he came to visit during Pastor's Week in October, and we got special permission to go out to the Ark Encounter and spend the night. And we got people out there to turn the lights off for us. It's not like, finding light switches. You got to find the breakers. And so it took us several hours to get the lights turned off. And so my friend set up his tripod and took a half-hour exposure of the sky here, capturing the ark well lit by what little light we had and the star trails. Anybody ever seen star trail photos like this? And if you look at the center, that right above the bow fin, you'll see a little dot. Anybody know what star that is? That star is Polaris, a.k.a. the North Star. And all the other stars seem to spin around in a circle around it. Only half an hour, you're only going to get 1/24th of a circle doing it that way. Now what's interesting is the angle that makes. If I point to the North Star and I point to the ground like this, I got an angle between my two arms. And that angle is equal to your latitude. Now, where I live in northern Kentucky, it's about 39 degrees, a little less than that at the Ark. Where you live, it's 60 degrees. So if it ever gets, I'm asking an awful lot for it to get dark and clear in the middle of the night. I'll have about a half an hour I can do this. Find the North Star, and it's going to be way up in the sky, about 2/3 the way up. Where I am, it's not even half the way up. I've been to South Florida. It's not even a quarter of the way up down there. It all depends upon that. And I can do a little diagram to show this to you. There's a green circle representing the Earth, and there is the rotation axis, the North Pole at the top, South Pole at the bottom. What do you call this circle or line halfway between? Very good, folks. You paid attention in geography class, didn't you? Now, I'm going to locate my position right there. And what would that angle be between the equator and my position? It will be equal to your latitude, right? For me, it's 39 degrees. For you, it's 60 degrees. That's close to halfway up, so that's pretty close for Kentucky, I believe. Now, if I'm standing at the end of that line, if I look up in the sky, I'm going to see everything up to the upper right of that. Below that, everything's going to be blocked by the Earth, right? So I'm going to see half of what's out there. The other half is going to be blocked. So I can put a little circle in there to represent my horizon. And that horizon is going to be tangent. You like these geometry terms? Tangent to the Earth's surface at my location. And so I'm going to kind of see a little dome over top of me like this. The sky certainly looks like a dome or an inverted bowl over top. That's why a planetarium works so well. You've been to planetaria before. They've got a dome and they show you the stars up on the ceiling. It's quite a nice illusion, actually. Now, if I draw a line from my position parallel to the Earth's equator like that, or Earth's rotation axis, the North Star is very close to the direction of the North Pole, North Celestial Pole, North Pole of the Earth. The axis of the Earth is pointing. It's about 3/4 of a degree off, but that's close enough. And so it's so far away from us, it doesn't matter if I'm at the North Pole or I'm sitting in Kentucky. I can look there along the parallel line like that. And so I can draw a little line towards my northern horizon like that. And that angle between those two last lines I drew is going to be equal to that angle of my latitude. It's a nice little geometry problem if you want to go through it. I'll come up with a piece of paper and I'll go through it if you want. But trust me, okay, for time being. But it's a nice little geometry problem. And I'm just showing you that the angle that it makes, the North Star, or what we call the North Celestial Pole, makes with the northern horizon is equal to my latitude. Very good. What happens if I go farther north, say to Oslo? It'll look like that, right? Notice the latitude's higher and that angle is higher. Now, I didn't actually, when I made this, I wasn't thinking of Oslo and Kentucky, but it's pretty close, actually. And I'm going to toggle back and forth between them, okay? Kentucky, Oslo, Kentucky, Oslo. Oops, Kentucky, Kentucky, Oslo, Kentucky, Oslo, Kentucky, Oslo, Kentucky. You got that? What's going on? And notice that that North Star is getting higher in the sky. There will be stars down by the horizon you see here. I can't see because they're blocked by the Earth towards the north. Also, looking to the south, I will see stars that you won't see. And in fact, where I live in Kentucky, there's a bright star called Canopus. I think it's the second brightest star in the sky. I never see it from Kentucky. But when I lived in South Carolina, about 4 degrees farther south, I regularly saw it briefly on winter evenings. If I go to South Florida, it's much higher. I go to South America, it's really high in the sky. Now, it does this in a very prescribed way. For every degree of latitude you move, the stars change their position by 60 nautical miles. And that's very good confirmation that the Earth is a globe. And Aristotle wrote that about 2,400 years ago. What do flat earthers have to say about this? Well, for the most part, I've never gotten an answer from them. They really have no idea what to do with it. Okay, want more proof? Well, a guy named Pliny the Elder, written in the 1st century AD, said that hulls of ships disappear first. I've always been a little skeptical of this because if you go out and watch ships as they sail away, they get really, really tiny, and they're hard to see without optical aid. I suspect what they did, and I've done this myself, you get down on the shore, on the beach, right by the water, and you look out, you may not be able to see an island over there, for instance. But if you climb up some bluffs, you can actually see it. I did this once years ago with my son. We were in Green Bay. You heard of Green Bay, Wisconsin? Yeah. Anybody follow football, you've heard of Green Bay. And we were down on the beach, and we were looking across Green Bay and towards northern part of Michigan, and we couldn't see anything. It was just open water. But we went up on a bluff above it, maybe 100 feet up, and we could see the tree line over in northern Michigan. It's because when we're down by the beach, we couldn't see it, but up higher, you could. And I think Pliny the Elder realized that, but he made it for ships. Now, I don't live near a large body of water. Living in Kentucky, it's in the interior of the country, but I do go to Florida and places like that occasionally. So I was in Virginia Beach a few years ago, and I was looking at this container vessel. It's got the NYK line, which is a major Japanese shipping firm. If you ever go to the ports in Oslo, in Norway, I'm sure you've seen their ships before. And you can see the containers all stacked up. And I've seen their ships before, and the thing is, those letters don't go all the way down to the water line. Now, this is out a couple of miles probably. I used the Questar telescope again, the 1,300 millimeter focal length with my digital SLR camera, the camera I took some pictures with earlier, attached to it. And you can see that something's blocking the bottom of the hole, isn't it? Looks like water. Why is the water between me and the ship blocking the bottom of the hole? Well, I think it's because there's a bulge like this between me and the hole. If the Earth were flat, that shouldn't happen. And then I did it again with the ship farther out. Now you can tell it's farther out because things are getting a little smaller. Can you see the hole? No, the hole's completely blocked off. And then the ship turned, and I'm seeing the stern. I can see the superstructure up there, the white part that you saw here. And then towards the end, all I can see is that superstructure. Now, it was getting late in the day. The sun was getting ready to set, and I couldn't take any more pictures. The light levels were dropping very quickly. I wish I could have kept following it, but I wasn't able to. Now, I did this more recently. I was in Florida. There's a ship coming towards you. You can see it's part of the superstructure there. Something out front. This thing on the far left, that's on the bow of the ship. The big white thing on the right, that's on the stern of the ship. And the thing in the middle is in the middle of the ship. Where's the rest of the ship? There's something blocking it. Well, it's heading into a port. And there you go. You can see more. It got closer to me. How can you tell it got closer to me? Well, it's bigger, right? Things, when they get closer to you, look bigger. I didn't change the scale on these photographs. They're all presented at the same scale. And so then now you can see that there's more to the front above the bow, more of the stern. There's still something missing in the middle. And the ship comes a little closer, and you can see more of it. And then you can see more of it, right? Isn't that amazing how that works? Same ship. It was turning as it came towards me. It's getting larger. Again, you're seeing less and less, just the opposite of the last one. The last one was sailing away. It got covered up by more of the water between, as you would expect on a spherical Earth. And the other one's coming toward us, less and less is being obscured because it's getting closer to me. Exactly what you would expect if the Earth is a globe, but not at all what you expect if the Earth is flat. So, let me show you these pictures again, like that, in order. And that's pretty clear. And I've done this a few times, done it in Florida several times, once in Virginia Beach, and every time I do it, I get the same results. Earth must be a globe. Okay, and there's a guy named Eratosthenes who lived around 200 BC, and he did one of the most remarkable things. I got excited when I share this with my students, and if they weren't excited with me, or if you're not excited with me, then I don't think you've gotten full attention to this. What did he do? He measured the Earth's circumference. He lived in Alexandria, that great city of Greek learning and culture that's founded by who? Alexander the Great, okay, a couple hundred years before, 130 years before. And they had a great library there, and that's where actually he worked at the library, Eratosthenes did. And it's up around 30 degrees latitude north of the equator. But, you know, he either went to southern Egypt, ancient city of Syene, now it's near modern-day Aswan, and either he went there himself or somebody reported this to him, but there was a deep well at Aswan, Syene, and if you stood there at noon on the summer solstice, the June solstice, with the sun directly overhead, it fully illuminated the bottom of the well for just a moment or two. Now, normally a deep well, you cannot see the bottom because it's a shaft like this, and if the light's not directly overhead, it casts a shadow, and it's very dark. With a bright light, you can see the bottom, and not with the sun shining. Only at local noon on the summer solstice could you actually do that in Syene. And he knew that up in Alexandria, where he normally lived, you never saw that. So he goes back to Alexandria, and the next year, or maybe a following year, some year later, he builds a gnomon. A gnomon is just a pillar of some sort. It could be wood, it could be stone. And he makes it vertical, and he knows the height because he built the thing. And it's sitting there on flat land. It turns out the Greeks and the Romans were pretty good engineers and builders. They could build stuff pretty accurately. So he builds this thing, and he waits until the June solstice at local noon, and the light comes down and casts a shadow like that. So you got a triangle. Here's the vertical gnomon. There's a shaft of light coming down. I only got 2 arms, so I can't show you the third side, but you got a triangle there. And you can see the triangle written right there, the pole at Alexandria. And he measures the length of the shadow down here, and he knows this side. If you ever studied trigonometry, you know if you know 2 sides of a right triangle, you know everything, don't you? So he was able to estimate or determine that this angle up here, the angle of which the sun was off from being vertical, was 1/50th of a circle. They expressed the angles not in degrees but in fractions of a circle. It is 1/50th, which is 7.2 degrees, to a very high precision. Well, he realized that that's the same angle that you have at the center of the Earth. That's the difference in latitude between the 2 positions. That's basic geometry again. And if you have an arc length between Alexandria and Syene, if you know that distance, all you have to do is multiply by 50 and you have the Earth's circumference. Divide by 2 pi and you get the radius, if that's what you want to do. You may wonder, well, how did he know the distance between them? There's something about Eratosthenes I did not tell you. He's called the father of geography. He coined the term. If you don't like geography, now you know who to blame. And he commissioned all sorts of surveying and mapping, and they were able to map out the distance. Today we know it's about 500 miles, 800 kilometers. So you multiply and and he got an answer pretty close to the actual value. Amazing. How many of you are impressed?
I am.
Yeah. If you're not impressed, either you've seen this before and you know it, or you haven't been paying attention. All right? This is really dynamite. I mean, not only did he know 2,200 years ago the shape of the Earth, but they knew how big it was. That's incredible that people could get that. They weren't so stupid back then, or were they? So how did this whole flat Earth myth arise? Everybody thought the world was flat until the time of Columbus. Well, in 19th century, we saw 3 different developments that I think played a role in this. Number 1 was the archaeology came about. And archaeology, the British invented that more or less. I want to say it was the first real attempt to make it a science. And so the British were kind of ruling everything back then. They followed the golden rule. You know, he who has the gold makes the rules. And so they went to Egypt, which they controlled. They went to Mesopotamia, which they controlled, and they started digging everywhere. And particularly Mesopotamia, they discovered in their excavations that some models, they saw this flat, round Earth with a dome over top. And they said, aha, this is the cosmology of the ancient Near East. Notice I put that in quotes there and air quotes here. You know why I did that? Because they soon found out that it wasn't the cosmology of the ancient Near East. It was a cosmology of the ancient Near East. There were several others. But they latched onto that one they found first, and that then became the standard. And to this day, there are people arguing that's the cosmology of the ancient Near East, which is rubbish. It's not true at all. Had to use a British term, rubbish, at that point. We Americans don't say rubbish very often. All right. You do. Okay, the second thing that came along was what's called a documentary hypothesis. Many of you probably are familiar with that, JPD, idea that Moses didn't write, if he existed at all, didn't write Genesis. or Exodus, none of the Pentateuch. Instead, there were different traditions. There were a group of the J group and the P group and the D group and E group, and they just kind of collated all of this, and they did it while either during the Babylonian captivity or shortly thereafter. Now this, you may recognize, is nothing less than a direct assault upon the inspiration and authority of Scripture, and it is, because Moses was real and Moses did write the Pentateuch, we do believe. Jesus seemed to think so, at least. And so, good enough for me. Anyway, the documentary hypothesis was this idea that just to redact everything, they said, look, if they picked up all these ideas like the flood legend, the creation myth from the Babylonians, they must have got their cosmology too. And so consequently, the Bible reflects this. And so you started seeing these things appearing like this. This is a drawing that some theologian put together saying this is the cosmology of the Bible. You got the earth down there, it's flat and round with a dome over top, and they start reading Scripture that way. Michael Heiser, do you know the name? Yep. He's one of the ones that have been pushing this now for the last 20 years, and he couldn't be more wrong about that. And then there was the conflict thesis. The conflict thesis was developed in the 19th century is that the idea that religion, read that as Christianity, and progress, scientific and otherwise, were always at loggerheads, always fighting one another, conflict between the two. And it wasn't until we finally got out of the Middle Ages and the Enlightenment comes along and we get rid of all the religion holding us back, and suddenly man can blossom. That was the idea. And so now the Bible is this enemy. And so, the Bible, the exhibit A to them was the Bible taught the earth was flat. And so you Christians now have a chance to redeem yourself by getting in on the ground floor of Darwinism. It was a big fat lie. The church never taught that. You're hard-pressed to find anybody, any Christian, there were a couple, but not many, that argued that. Most of them said, yeah, the earth is a globe. Even though it was a big lie, they got away with it, and nobody called it on them, apparently, because how many theologians and pastors and schools begin to kowtow to evolution? They did, to Darwinism. All right, I won't go to Washington Irving, no big deal. Well, here's a good example of a book. This is an illustrated Bible, and it shows the second day of creation. You can see Jesus there. As we know from the New Testament, he was the creator, is the creator. And he's there next to the earth. You can see the water above, and you've got the expanse of the thing God made on day 2. I'm going to talk about that on Sunday, by the way, what that is. But look at the earth. What shape is it? Looks like a ball to me. This is from a book, a Bible, illustrated Bible, that we know was written or published, put together around 1450. How do we know? Well, because it belonged to King John the Good of France. And around 1456 or 7, I think it was in October, September, October, I can't remember the exact year or day, but we do know the exact day, the English defeated the French in the Battle of Poitiers. And in that battle, this Bible was taken as a war prize. And it's been in continual possession of the English ever since. They haven't given it back. This is 150 years before Columbus. And you can find other depictions from the Middle Ages showing a globe earth. So again, it's a lie. Well, how did this get started in more modern times then? Well, a guy named Samuel Rowbottom, and we can blame it on him because he's English, okay? He lived in the 19th century, and he did what was called the Bedford Level experiment. You ever been to the Bedford Level?
Yeah, I used to live there.
Oh, really? Okay, I've not been to it. As I understand, it's like a river that's been straightened and everything. It's 6 miles, about 10 kilometers long. You okay with miles? I use miles all the time. I may interpret for you. 6 miles is 10 kilometers, okay? So it's 6 miles long. And he said, look, if the earth is a globe, then in those 6 miles or 10 kilometers, a boat sailing away ought to have this coverage of its hull, like we just showed you in the pictures. And so he's got this is right out of Rowbottom's book that he wrote. And what he did is he got down in one end of the Bedford Level. He's at point A. You see him over there. He's down in the water, and he's weighted in his waders there, and he's got a telescope, and it's 8 inches above the water. Why 8 inches? Well, if the Earth is a globe 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometers in circumference, then 1 mile away, if you're 8 inches above, your vision will be blocked by the curvature of the Earth. You will see 1 mile and no more. All right. So he got down there in the water, And he got a guy in a boat, a rowboat, and he had a big flag or pennant up in the back of the boat that you could see for some distance. And the guy's rowing down the canal. And he said, look, if the Earth is a globe, then after 1 mile, it's going to start disappearing. And certainly by the time you get 5 miles beyond that, the total length, the 10 kilometers away, it'll be a difference of about 24 feet. And the boat was only about 8 or 10 feet tall. So he reasoned that by the time the boat got to the very end of the Bedford level, there would be no visibility if the Earth is a globe. He saw the boat the entire time, saw the flag the entire time. So he concluded the Earth is flat. Already we have a problem because that's not what I showed you with the photographs, was it? So who are you going to believe? What Rowbottom's telling you, or what you can see with your own two eyes? Who said that originally? Groucho Marx said that, all right? So anyway, there's something that they didn't take in consideration, Rowbottom did, and it's called atmospheric refraction. And I'll very quickly explain this to you. Light generally does travel in a straight line. But what if there's a temperature difference? In this case, what we call a temperature inversion. You know that the temperature is usually warmest near the surface of the Earth, and as you rise in elevation, the temperature drops, doesn't it? That's the normal way things work. But if you're on next to a large body of cool water, then if it's a warm day, the water has a lot of heat in it. It can transfer some of that heat into the air, and it chills the air. And so you end up with a layer of relatively cool air sitting there, and above that, warmer air, and then it starts getting cooler again above that. You see why I would call it inversion. You got a reversal of what's really going on usually. Now, when do you see temperature inversions? Well, on warm days when the water's cool. And that's usually true on most warm spring and summer days. How cold's the water around here in the fjord? It's cooler than the air temperature, isn't it? Almost always in the winter. Now in the summer, in the winter it won't be like that, but in the summer it will be like that nearly every day. So you have a possibility of a temperature inversion. So what I'm about to tell you here is the best time to do these experiments is when there's no temperature inversion. The best way to do that is to do it on a cold autumn or winter day. How many of you are up for going to the beach on a cold autumn or winter day? Got one nut back there, raise his hand. All right. Most people don't want to do that for obvious reasons. Hey, if you're going to do it right or don't do it at all, my saying. The flat earthers go to the beach on warm sunny days and warm summer and spring days. I did mine on a cold autumn day. That's the reason why I got the results I did. Here's what happens. The light ray is supposed to go like that. If the Earth were a globe and there's no refraction going on, then the light ray, leaving that thing, will go parallel to the Earth's surface, and it would just zip off into space, and it would never get to you, the observer. But what happens is if you've got a cold layer of air down there, and that line, that red beam starts to climb upward, like, as you can see it will do, it's going to go from cooler air to warmer air, and the speed of light is slower in the cooler air. And that's what causes refraction, what causes lens to refract light. So what will happen is that light, instead of going straight off on that red line, will curve around the curvature of the Earth, and it can do that for miles and miles. So the way to avoid that is not go out on warm spring and summer days. And here is a modern example. This is a picture of Chicago skyline taken by a guy named Joshua Nowicki. By the way, Joshua Nowicki is not a flat earther, but flat earthers love these photos that he does. Now, he took this from Grand Mere State Park in the state of Michigan. Now, if you don't know anything about the United States geography, between the state of Michigan and the city of Chicago, there's about 100 kilometers of Lake Michigan between the two. He's taking a picture of the Chicago skyline from 100 kilometers away. And if the Earth is a globe, 25,000, 40,000 kilometers around, then every bit of the Chicago skyline should be below the horizon. So how come you can see it? Well, Joshua Nowicki knows what he's doing. He's a good photographer. He understands refraction. Now, if you took a picture and you saw no skyline, you just simply see water and then sky. Is that a very interesting picture? Not terribly. But what happens if you take the impossible picture? The skyline should be hidden by the Earth's curvature. That's an interesting photo, isn't it? Now, that doesn't prove the Earth is a globe. In fact, what it proves is that Joshua Nowicki knows when to do his photography because he knows what the science of this. And he also made a video of some of these. I wish I had a video, but I don't. And in the video, the skyline bobs up and down like this. Now, the skyline won't do that if you're just looking straight across at it. It will do that if refraction changes, and it does. So contrast it with my earlier photos where I didn't show that because apparently there was no temperature inversion the days I was doing what I did. There's another famous example. This is called the Black Swan photo. It was taken 6 years ago. A guy in Southern California near Santa Barbara. He's looking out at two oil platforms. One is called the platform habitat. It's 9.41 miles from the beach, and that's about 15 kilometers. And the other one is the platform Hill House. It's about 10 kilometers out. And he's looking at it, and he's taking his camera from about 6 feet. That's about 2 meters above the water at the beach. And he reasoned that far out that some of the platforms should be blocked. But you can clearly, by the horizon, you can clearly see the horizon is behind both of them. The horizon is well beyond that. They said, you know, if the Earth is a globe, 40,000 miles in kilometer, 40,000 kilometers in circumference, both of those should be blocked by different amounts. The one on the right should be blocked more, less than the one on the left, since it's farther away, should be blocked more because it's farther away. Since neither one of them is blocked at all, the horizon lies beyond. That disproves the Earth is a globe. The Earth must be flat. Well, you mean like this is what you expect to see on a globe Earth? Yeah, look at the platform on the right. You can see they're the same platforms, same location, different day. Look on the right, a little bit of it's blocked. On the left, quite a bit more is blocked. What you see on the lower right is exactly what you expect to see if the Earth is a globe. What you see on the upper left is not what you expect to see. Both photographs made by the same man. So what does it prove, these two photographs together? Well, if you take the one on the left, it proves the Earth is not a globe on its face. If you take the one on the lower right, it proves the Earth is a globe. You've got contradictory evidence here, don't you? How do you handle contradictory evidence? Very carefully. All right. Now, here's what this guy in his video actually wrote. The grammar's not real good, but he's doing this talking about the photograph on the lower right. You ready for this? He says, most days, normal visibility of platforms and boats will appear they are behind the horizon, curvature of the Earth. Notice what he said. Most days, I see evidence that the Earth has curvature. What did he say about the first photograph, the one on the upper left? Once in a while, not very often, there will be days when conditions are right to see full image. So he's saying that this photograph is rare, and this photograph is common. So therefore, the Earth is flat. I'm not kidding. It's exactly what he said. That's called, I don't know if you have this in Norwegian, but in English, we call that cherry picking. You go out and you pick the data you want, and you ignore all the rest of it. That's no way to do science, and it's no way to decide an issue. Atmospheric refraction is a real thing. I've never actually seen it appreciably. In fact, every time I've done this experiment, I get results that are consistent with a globe Earth. Even an honest flat earther, very rarely, they will admit that's what they normally get. But the flat earthers don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about the one experiment they did that shows the Earth is a globe. That's dishonest, folks. That's just dishonest. So the flat Earth movement was born by Samuel Rowbottom back in the 1800s. And when he did this, the whole movement grew in the 19th century, first in England, then it got exported to the United States and to South Africa and other places. And the movement began to wane considerably in the early 20th century. There were a number of books written between like 1880s up through around 1906, 1910, a bunch of books. I have several copies of them myself. I've read through them. There are a few others out there I've not actually gotten copies of yet. And the Flat Earth Society was created in 1956. And there have been several Flat Earth Societies. And some of those have been kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's not clear which ones are for real. One would fold and another would start. I think the one that's existing now, it's entirely online. It tends to be serious, I think. But if you talk to flat earthers, they will dismiss the Flat Earth Society, saying that it's a shill. That means that these are paid opposition. The people telling us the earth is a globe are putting this to fool you, to make flat earthers look foolish. So they will dismiss the Flat Earth Society. So if you got a flat earther, never mention the Flat Earth Society, because they will dismiss anything that the Flat Earth Society webpage has on it. Never mind the fact that they would agree with 99% of the stuff that's on the Flat Earth Society webpage. And the whole thing got revived in the 21st century, as I said, around 2014. I think what happened is a guy out there, I don't even know if this guy really exists, to tell you the truth, but he said that he started reading some of these books, and he brought them back up to some YouTube videos. And of course, if it's on the internet, it's true. So this whole thing was promulgated by social media, and YouTube began to change about 3.5 years ago, when they made some changes in the way they recommend things to you. And there's a big, long controversy about that. And there's a broad range of theological beliefs. There are a lot of New Agers, there are Muslims, there are Mormons into this. It's a broad range of things, but most of them claim to believe in some sort of God. And I'm going to take a little time here to talk about the supposed biblical arguments. I think it's important talking to an audience like this. So I'll give just a few, not all of them. Some people have claimed like 200 plus Bible verses that say the earth is flat. All right? So one of them, they say, is that the rakia of day 2 proves the earth is flat. That's the expanse that God made on day 2. The purpose of this was to separate waters above and below. And the luminaries were placed there on day 4. I'll talk more about this on Sunday, as I said. And it's often translated firmament. I'll talk about why that was the case. Today it's translated as expanse. And if you read the day 2 and the day 4 account, I would challenge you to anywhere see where it says there the earth is flat. I mean, I've read it many times, and I never once thought, oh, this is teaching the earth is flat. But somehow people read that and said, yeah, that proves the Bible teaches a flat earth. And I'm just puzzled where you get that. You might be trying to quote Michael Heiser on that rather than quoting Scripture. And then they say that the earth was made before the sun, according to Genesis 1, and that means the earth is flat too. Yeah, I'm scratching. Yeah, I'm seeing some puzzled looks. You should, because I've read those passages many times, and I never got out of that the earth is flat. How in the world do you count that as a flat earth passage? I do not know. But you know what? If the Bible teaches the earth is flat, don't you think somewhere there'd be a verse that says something like, oh, the earth is flat? Yeah. Now, you say you read the Bible many times. Have you run into that passage anywhere? Okay, we got one witness here that says he's never seen it. I've never seen it. If any of you think you found a passage that says the earth is flat, I'd love to hear it. But several of us read through Scripture a number of times, and we've never found it. It must be hidden between the lines or in the reference notes or something there. I'm not sure. What happens is that the flat earthers tend to want to read certain verses that way. They say, oh, this reads to be flat earth, and so therefore the earth is flat. I'm saying, well, wait, that's according to you, but that's not what the Scripture actually says. Now, one question that comes up pretty quickly is everything in the Bible literal? Thank you. Sometimes people say, yes, it is. We say, we creationists, we believe the Bible is literally true. Well, I bet you don't, because there are figures of speech found in the Bible. There are idioms found in the Bible. There are similes. You know what a simile is? You say something is like this or like that. It's as this. And then there are metaphors, which you don't say it's like this, you say it is this. We sort of learn the difference. I learned it in English class doing poetry growing up, how to tell the difference between the two. And then when you get to the poetic and the prophetic books, there's a tremendous amount of symbolism and allegorical things. And you need to be extremely careful in how you handle those sorts of things. But you know what? These symbolic things that you find in the prophetic and poetic books are absent from the historical narratives. You see, here's the problem. Many people are fearful to say that anything in the Bible is not literal, because if they fear if they do that, it opens the door. You know, once you admit, okay, there are a few things in the Bible which are kind of metaphorical or they're symbolic, then they say, well, then, of course, the days of Genesis 1 are not literal days, and so it goes. Well, that fear should never be your motivation. You should want to rightly divide the Word of God. And there are good historical reasons and contextual reasons why the days of Genesis 1 are real days. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. That's not my purpose tonight. But there are many good reasons. We have resources that deal with that. And it's, again, these are in the historical narratives. Genesis is not poetry. Genesis is not prophecy. It has some prophecy in it, but it's not prophecy. So don't be afraid. There are some symbolic things in Scripture, but you don't find that in Genesis 1 or 2 and a lot of other places in Genesis because it's part of historical narrative. They like Isaiah 40:22. It says this, "It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell." And they say, this is a circle. A basketball or a football, soccer ball is not a circle. It is a ball. And so they say this is what the Bible teaches. You can see that family values flat earth globe. It's based upon the circle of the earth. And you can see that's the model they have. At the center of their circle is the North Pole. And then you get Asia, North America, all these other countries out there. And then you finally reach Antarctica, but Antarctica is not a continent sitting at the bottom of the globe. No, it's a perimeter made of ice. We call it the ice wall. And it holds all the water in. You ever wonder why the water stays in? It doesn't run off the edge. There's an ice wall to keep that from happening. That's the way God made it. You're laughing, but they're serious about this, folks. They actually are serious about it. And there is no South Pole. That's an illusion. I have a good friend of mine who spent months on a research trip many years ago, research project he was working on, where he was doing some astronomy at the South Pole. I guess my friend was just a liar about all that. Never went there because there is no South Pole, folks. By the way, they say the reason why this must mean circle is because the Hebrew word that Isaiah used. And they say that elsewhere in the book of Isaiah, he used a word for ball. It says, "I will toss you like a ball," talking to Israel. I said, if God would have meant ball, he would have used that word here instead of that one. Good point. Except for one thing. That word that's translated ball, it's used a second time in Isaiah. They never bring that one up. It's used twice. One time it's translated ball. The other time, it talks about encircling a city, sieging it. Have you ever heard of a siege that was spherical? No, when you siege a city, it's round, isn't it? Two-dimensional round, not three-dimensional round. So if they were honest, they would tell you, okay, honestly, this word is found somewhere else. And by the way, this Isaiah passage, some people, some creationists I've heard in the past, would argue that the word there in Hebrew actually means ball. And they say this is an argument that the earth is a globe. Well, who's right? The flat earthers say it only means a circle, and some other people say, no, it means a globe. Well, I've asked some Hebraists. I know some world-class Hebraists that went to world-class institutions. I can email them anytime I want to call them and ask them questions. And so I've asked them, what does this Hebrew word mean? And they say something round. Now, if I were to ask most of you here what shape the earth is, I don't know how it works in Norwegian, but in English, if I say what shape is the earth, most people will say round. But is it a two-dimensional round like this, or is it a three-dimensional round like a ball? Well, it turns out it's ambiguous in English, isn't it? Turns out the same Hebrew word used in Isaiah 40:22 is ambiguous. Could it mean a disk of an earth, flat, round earth? Yeah, it could. Could it mean a spherical earth? Yes, it could. That verse, I would love to claim it as a globe argument, but honesty prevents me from doing so. Unfortunately, many flat earthers are not as honest as I am. Okay, does the earth have four corners? Consider Isaiah 11:12. It says, "He will raise a signal for the nations, and he will assemble the banished of Israel, and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." That's Old Testament. You go to the New Testament, Revelation 7:1, it says, "After this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on the earth or sea or against any tree." And they say, show me any corners, let alone four corners, on a globe earth. You can't. So therefore, the earth is not a globe and the earth is flat. I can't believe they use that argument. Where are the corners on this? There aren't any corners on it. Yet flat earthers make that argument. Amazing. Obviously, they've not thought this through very carefully. Well, there was one guy, Orlando. So which is it? Is it flat or is it round? I mean, square, is it round? Well, a fellow named Orlando Ferguson kind of split the difference. That's his drawing he made in the 1890s. You can see it's kind of square and kind of round at the same time. And it's kind of dimpled there. And to me, it looks like a roulette wheel. All right, so that's a roulette wheel Earth as far as you see the angels on the four corners. By the way, sometimes I forget to go into this. People ask me, what does that mean, the four corners of the earth? Well, I think it's an idiomatic expression, probably referring to the four directions, north, south, east, and west. Even today, if you look up a detailed weather forecast, they'll give you temperature and humidity and atmospheric pressure, and they'll give you wind direction and speed, won't they? The wind is like so many knots out of the southwest. Four directions, just like back then. That's what it's talking about. In fact, when it mentions the four winds, that tells you, a good connection there. Okay, what about the ends of the earth? It's used 28 times in the Old Testament. For instance, Psalm 67:7 says, God shall bless us, let all the ends of the earth fear him. Ah, they say, does a globe have an end? No, you go round and around and around and around, and you never reach the end, do you? Ha. But a flat round earth has an end. It's right there. You can see it. Ah, this proves the earth is a flat plane, doesn't it? Flat disk. Hold on a minute. What does it say? It says, God shall bless us. It's usually in the prophetic and always in the poetic passages, you end up with parallels and contrasts. There's a parallelism here. It says, God shall bless us. Who are the us? It's talking about people, right? And it says, let all the ends of the earth fear him. Can real estate fear God? I don't think so. It's talking about people, isn't it? Again, it's an idiomatic expression talking about people living at the remotest parts of the world, like Svalbard, right? Is that the ends of the earth? I would think so. Anybody here been there? Is it the end of the earth? Almost there? You can see the end of the earth from there, right? Yeah, it's pretty remote, actually. Why anybody would want to go there except to mine coal, and even that's questionable, why you would go there. But it's a pretty far out place. Or how about this one? Isaiah 45:22. Turn to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God and there is no other. Can geography be saved? No, it's talking about people again, isn't it? Okay, what about the tree of Daniel 4? I love this one, the tree of Daniel 4. They quote here, Daniel 4:11, it says, the tree grew and became strong, and its top reached the heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. There's the end of the earth mentioned again, but notice what's happening. If they say this, they say if the earth is a globe, and a giant tree grew up, could you see it from all the entire earth? Well, no, at best half the earth, right? But if the earth were flat, then if a tree grew up high enough, you could see it from everywhere, couldn't you? Huh, that proves the earth is flat, doesn't it? Well, hold on a minute here. This is just one verse out of a whole chapter. It turns out the whole chapter is a nice little interlude there containing an account of what happened in the time of Daniel. In verse 10, the verse right before verse 11, it's Nebuchadnezzar talking, and he says, the visions of my head as I lay in my bed were these. I saw and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. This was a dream. It was a dream. I don't know about your dreams, but my dreams are weird. They're surrealistic. I'll tell you about one dream I had. I don't remember many of my dreams, but I had this a number of years ago and just stood out in my mind. I'm in a large room, much bigger than this, and high ceiling and tall walls, and suddenly this giant rhinoceros comes crashing through this wall to my right, and it comes charging towards me. And by the time it gets to me, it's not a rhinoceros anymore, it's my mother. And then my mother turned into a dove, and she flew away. I have no idea what that dream means, if it means anything. That's the kind of dreams I have all the time. Weird stuff. I wake up in the morning, that's really a weird dream. So anything goes in a dream. Now,
but your dream is not a prophecy.
Well, this is Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but it was prophetic. You're right. We're just going to get to that next. All right. Again, did I mention it's a dream? Well, as it turns out, Daniel mentioned it, verses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 18, and 19. It's a dream! Why so many times? Just in case you forgot that it's a dream, folks. It's not real. All right? Next point. It was a dream of a pagan king, Nebuchadnezzar. Not exactly the best source, necessarily. And then the tree, when Daniel interprets the dream, he says, I'm a little afraid to tell you this, king, but that tree is you. This is getting weirder by the moment. It's a dream, which is not real, remember? And there's a tree, which being inside of a dream can't be real, but the tree isn't a tree anyway. It just represents something. You see, we're getting several steps removed from reality at this point. It's hardly teaching anything about what the earth's shape is. And the dream was fulfilled. He lost his mind for a while, 7 years. Note that the passage is not teaching cosmology at all. It's not clear that it reflected the cosmology that Nebuchadnezzar believed. It was just a dream that he had. If I dream tonight, and boy, I wish that I would have this dream so I could honestly say it. But if I dreamed tonight where the earth was flat and I told you about it, would that mean I believe the earth is flat? Of course not. It just means I had a dream that I thought that the earth was flat. That's just a dream, what it does. So again, they strike out on this again and again and again. I've examined their 200 or 240 or 400 passages, and I can't find one of them that says the earth is flat. They really set the bar low on their evidence, don't they? How do flat earthers talk? That's the current flat earth model, by the way. As I showed you before, it's a round flat disk, and you've got the dome over top, and the stars and the sun and the moon are in that dome. Now, already you may have noticed a problem, because if you've got a dome sitting here above the earth that has a bright light we call the sun's light can reach everywhere on the earth's surface, can't it? So how do they explain day or night? Because it would seem like it's going to be day for everybody and night for everybody, or one or the other, but not both, or some parts. Well, they've got a ready answer. They say that the sun is not just an omnidirectional beam. It's just some protected streetlights that shine down a cone like this. And if you're inside that cone, like you can see that little yellow footprint there, it's daytime, but if you're out of it, it's nighttime. And so they put it to motion like this. The sun is that bright yellow thing going around, lighting up, and that little other thing is the moon orbiting around. And so as the sun goes around each day like this, it's alternating daytime and nighttime like that. That's their explanation. Shines down. And notice that the sun doesn't actually set, does it? Sun doesn't rise. By the way, the flat earthers tell us to trust our senses. Do you feel like you're on a spinning globe moving through space? No, of course not. So therefore, it must not be doing it. It must be flat and stationary. Trust your senses. Well, I'll tell you what, we can go outside if it's going to be clear, and we can watch the sunset tonight. We can watch it tomorrow. I've done that many, many times. I'm sure you have too. Yet you're not supposed to trust your senses. The sun doesn't actually rise or set. It just appears to rise or set. It's an optical illusion that God has ordained will work to make it we think the sun is rising and setting. Well, I want to test this claim. Let's suppose there is a sun above the earth like this, and it goes in a circle. If I'm right here, okay, then around noon the sun will be here. But earlier in the day it's over here, and later in the day it's over there. What's true is the fact that the sun is changing distance from me throughout the day, isn't it? So the sun should be closest to us at local noon when the sun is as high in the sky as it can get. Everybody understand that? You can just take any object you want. If you move it around, the farther away it gets, the smaller it appears, and so forth. So I tested this claim a few years ago. What I did is I looked up on their claims, and many of them are saying that the sun is 3,000 miles above the earth and it's 32 miles across, because that works out. Once you get the distance, the sun's angular diameter is a ½ degree, and so it works out. Now, 3,000 miles, that's, what about, I'm blowing it here. 4,800 kilometers, thank you. And the sun's diameter then in kilometers will be around 50 kilometers across. All right, I have to try to translate. That's good on the fly. All right, if you do that, it doesn't rise or set, and they claim as a matter of perspective that makes the sun seem to set and rise. But that only happens if you get to the vanishing point. But that's another question that they don't understand perspective either, though they claim to be experts on it. So I did this test on August 3rd, 2016. It's been 6 years now, almost. I've been bird dogging this for over 6 years. And what I did is I went outside with a Questar telescope again, and I took a picture of the sun at 2 times of the day. The first one I took at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, when the sun was only 8 degrees high. I didn't do it right at sunrise because where I did it at the observatory, there's some trees. And I had to wait till it got above the trees so I could see it. And then I repeated it at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's equivalent of local noon, when the sun is as high as it can get. Turned out it was 63 degrees. I can make little triangles there, and I can apply a little bit of trigonometry to that. And knowing what I know, I can calculate how much larger the sun would appear when it's at noon, local noon, to when it's lower in the sky, because it's farther away and appears small at that point. Now, I gave you some distances here, 32 miles and 3,000 miles high. As it turns out, it doesn't matter how high it is, because it cancels out when you do the triangles. That side over there is always 3,000 miles, so it just cancels out completely. It's the beauty of doing it in terms of algebraic expressions, because you don't need any actual numbers. All you have to believe is that the Earth is flat and the sun goes around like this above the Earth. It doesn't matter how big the sun is or how far away high it is, you get the same result. That's nice. So,
do they have any explanation why? Usually there are clouds in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
The light from the ground will be reflected in the clouds, and it will be never.
Yeah, that's been brought up like a sunset. You can see lights, the sunlight shining underneath, and they have all sorts of hocus pocus that I can't understand that they try to claim.
It will never be totally dark because of it.
Yeah.
You always see bright clouds.
Yep, but if I could, if their arguments made sense, I might find them convincing. But they try to handle that, and I don't understand their argument at all. It's just mumble, shaking, waving the hands to try to wave it away. Well, I tested this, as I said, and the calculation I found by doing the numbers is, and I've printed this up, by the way, it's on one of my articles on our website. I calculated that when the sun was lower in the sky, high in the sky, it should appear 6.4 times larger than when it's low in the sky. That's simply a result of perspective. You cannot deny the mathematics. So I went out and took this picture, and right there it is. And it's kind of dull and red because it's low in the sky, because you know the sun gets low from what we call atmospheric extinction. By the way, see the tree branch in the lower right? That's because it was just barely above the trees. Now I wanted to take the same settings. I didn't want to change anything about this. So I kept the same ISO setting and kept the same exposure time. I can't remember what it is. I have to look it up. But the next photograph I'm going to show you is the one I took at local noon several hours later. And I used the exact same one. The only difference is the sun's a lot brighter because it's higher in the sky. And there it is. And as you can see, that is 6.4 times larger than the other photograph. So therefore, the Earth is flat, right? It looks the same size to me. And so what I did is I printed them out on big sheets of paper, and I measured them very carefully. And to my ability to measure it, I got the same. I think they differed by 1 millimeter, but when you have a thing this big, 1 millimeter isn't much, and it can be caused by rippling of the paper going through the paper printer. So again, it disproves that the Earth is flat, as they say. You know, they claim that the North Star is visible well into the southern hemisphere. I've been to the southern hemisphere 10 times. I've never seen the North Star down there. You can't, but they what do I know? I've only been doing astronomy for a half century, and I only have a PhD in it. They know more about me than I do, because they've seen some YouTube videos. Also, the circular patterns of stars throughout the night can happen only on a flat Earth. Remember those pictures I showed you with the stars going like this around in circles? They said that can only happen if the Earth is flat. Well, I beg to differ, because here is their model again. And the North Star would be near the top up there. I drew a line from the top down to, turned out to be Australia. Don't worry about what location. It's any location I want like that. And it's going to rotate around that vertical axis, like the whole sky is going to spin around that axis that you see there. And so any star that you have there is going to go through a circle like that. Now, if you're at the North Pole of the Earth and you look at that circle that's concentric with you, you are going to see a circle, aren't you? But what if you get anywhere else off the North Pole? It's going to look like this. It's going to be an ellipse. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be like that. So I simulated this in our planetarium. I took my camera and I set it up high as I could, and I moved it off center, and I had them spin the stars around the zenith, the point overhead. And I took, so exactly what I'm talking about here. It's like, here's your planetarium dome. They're going to spin the stars like this. Instead of putting the camera here, I put the camera there. And this is what I got. Are those circular patterns at all? No, they're elliptical, aren't they? Can you clearly see that? Yeah. This is the photograph I took in Arizona once. 30-minute exposure. Are they elliptical or are they circular? They're circular, yeah. I did this above my house. It's a time-lapse video. You can see the North Star above the point of the house. You see the Big Dipper up there, upper left? This is my second attempt at a time-lapse. There you go. Look at that. And you can see it's spinning. Notice the North Star doesn't appear to be moving. It actually is, but not much. And it's spinning like that, right? Everybody got that? All right. Now, I went to the Southern Hemisphere a few years ago. I took this one. Now, there is no South Star like we have in the North Star, but I'm going to have it take it off like this for over several hours. You notice the sky spinning, and it's spinning around a spot a little right of center near the bottom above those trees. Do you notice anything different from the other photograph? It's going clockwise as opposed to counterclockwise. Now, it's all going east to west across the sky like that. But if I look towards the north, I'm going to look this way, and it's going to go counterclockwise. Same rotation. If I look to the south, it's going to be clockwise. Folks, there are two spots in the sky around which the stars seem to spin. I can see the north celestial pole or I can see the south celestial pole. Only at the equator will they both be up, and they'll be right at the horizon. On this model, there's only one point around which they spin. This simple observation, once again, disproves the flat Earth model. How many times have I disproved it for you tonight? A bunch of times. Again and again and again. It fails. So, if the Earth is flat, and we all believe it's a globe, we must have had a vast conspiracy of who's doing all of this. Certainly NASA's in on it. You know, many scientists are in on it. Maybe the Freemasons are behind it. You heard about the Freemasons? You know, they're always behind everything, aren't they? And then the Jesuits. Oh, the Jesuits are really the whipping boys, right? And then, of course, many people say that it's the Jews that are against them, are part of this. Now, never mind the fact that none of those three groups seem to get along very well, but they think, some people say all three of them are involved. But they don't get along. That's what they want you to think. The fact they don't get along proves that they really do. Yeah, that's weird. All right, there's a guy named Edward Henry out there who's a major proponent of this, of the Jews at least. He's written 2 books, and I've read both of them, and the first one shocked me. He wrote a book called The Greatest Lie on Earth, Proof That Our World Is Not a Moving Globe. Let me give you a few sentences or statements from that book. Communism is essentially Talmudic Judaism. Do not think that Jews are ignorant of the fact that Satan is the god of their religion. This evil doctrine can be seen in the Talmud, where incest, fornication, adultery, etc. are promoted as virtues and something to be desired. The ritual sacrifice of Gentile children by Jews has led to repeated banishments of Jews from one nation after another throughout history. This goes on for 140 pages. I felt dirty just reading it. It made me angry. This is some of the most vile anti-Semitism I've ever read. And I called them out in a blog about it. I have a Jewish friend that thanked me. She really appreciated my saying this. It's great to hear a Christian call this out. We should have been calling it out all along, but this is horrible. And you know what? On a discussion group I'm a part of on the internet, I quoted from Henry's book, and I asked flat earthers here in this group, what do you have to say about this? Crickets, nothing. Will you please condemn this? Crickets, nothing. Repeatedly, I begged them, please, 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 condemn this. And they wouldn't. Not one of them. One guy even said, well, I'm sure there's some globe earthers who've said some anti-Semitic things. I said, fine, give me a name. I'll condemn them so fast it'll make your head swim. He didn't. None of them did. I finally concluded. I said, folks, you've had ample opportunity and repeated chances to condemn this. I can only assume, I can only conclude that you must agree with him. There is a strong anti-Semitic movement going on within the flat earth movement. It's terrible. I have not found a flat earther yet who would condemn this stuff, and that's frightening to me. If the earth is flat, nothing can orbit the earth. The moon can't. of course, because, hey, it's a glass dome of some sort, or something like glass, and the moon's orbiting inside of it. You can't go outside of that. It's unbreakable. So there are no satellites either. NASA's been lying about that since 1957, 58. There are no astronauts. In fact, they call them astronauts, N-O-T-S. They like a lot of wordplay over there. And we haven't been to the moon. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's been a strong moon hoax thing going on for 20 years. Again, the internet, a lot of this. I don't get involved in that too much because, to me, it's a distraction. The people who started the moon hoax thing were globe earthers. So what's happened is they've kind of subsumed all these others here. But even if we didn't go to the moon, even if that was a hoax, it doesn't prove the Earth is flat, does it? So it's kind of a distraction, I think. So I don't bother with it. You know what? At least 2 Christians walked on the moon. There were 12 men who walked on the moon, and yes, they did walk on the moon, and 2 of them later on came to Christ. And so when I was first offered something about moon hoax, moon landing denial 15 years ago from a Christian, I just said, well, you know, I pointed out that to him, and I said, you know, you're in a position of saying that 2 fellow Christians are lying about one of the biggest things that ever happened to them. And that stopped this guy in his tracks. Never said another word after that. Unfortunately, the flat earthers just simply come back, well, they're a bunch of Freemasons and liars and all this kind of stuff. Well, I asked Charlie Duke. Anybody know the name Charlie Duke? He was Apollo 16 astronaut, walked on the moon. He's from my adopted hometown of Lancaster, South Carolina. I was good friends with his identical twin brother, Bill. I worked with his niece at the university. So I've talked to Charlie several times. And a few years ago, I said, Charlie, I emailed him and said, can you give me a quote? He said, sure. He says, I was the lunar module pilot on the Apollo 16 mission to the moon. We launched from the Kennedy Space Center on Florida until April 16, 1972. We left Earth orbit for 3 days, trip to the moon, and about 3 hours later, we left it 3 hours later. As we maneuvered our spacecraft to dock with our lunar module, the Earth came into view about 20,000 miles away. It was an awesome sight. As you can see in the photo, the Earth is obviously a sphere and not a flat circle. As we journeyed to the moon, we could look out the window and see a smaller Earth, and each time we would see different land masses, so it was obviously rotating on its axis. Direct quote from a fellow Christian. Jeffrey Williams is a current astronaut. He spent a lot of time, he's retired now, but I've met him too. He wrote a book called Work of His Hands, and he took all these photographs of the Earth from orbit, from the ISS. Here's one of them. What shape is the Earth? It's a globe. We have Barry Wilmore is another astronaut. Currently, he's going up soon and going up to the ISS, and he's a speaker for AIG from time to time. I've actually spoken at the same conference with him a couple of times. Great guy. Well, what is the flat earthers' motivation? Why do they do this? Well, I'm convinced that some are undoubtedly well-intentioned. I've met a lot of people. I've gone to 3 Flat Earth International conferences. I've written a book about this subject, and I've written like 30 news articles or blogs on our website. If you want to learn more, just go to our website and search Flat Earth. You'll hit the hits pretty fast. I think some people are doing this as a prank. They're just having a lot of fun, just messing with people's minds. That's wicked, but people do that sometimes. I sometimes will tease somebody for a while, but then I'll let them know I'm pulling your leg. But this goes on and on and on, and that's just cruel. Some are malicious. I think they're trying to make Christians look foolish and discredit the Bible. And that's I think, a horrible sort of motivation. As I said, I have written a book on the subject. It's called Falling Flat. I'm sorry I didn't bring any with me, but they are available. I have to pay shipping from the States, I'm afraid, so it might be a little pricey. Maybe get the deal together and order a bunch, and then people can share the shipping cost that way. But anyway, it goes over what I've said here tonight and a lot more. But I think I'm out of time, aren't I? Have I gone over? So thank you very much for coming.